instance, the Moore Commission is looking at educational reform. They're looking at mandates. They're looking at the idea of regionalization, which I think this day and age can potentially be a very exciting topic, particularly as our society is evolving and the manner by which we all communicate. There are a number of opportunities within the concept of regionalization that I think we could all, that our state could capitalize upon to assist us financially. One example that's being looked at is the possibility of regionalizing 911 call centers. Is there a need for each separate individual municipality to have their own 911 call center? Or is there a way by which, particularly some of the smaller municipalities in our state, can join together and form a regional entity that provides the same service to all their residents? So we're looking at state mandates also, which is another hot topic up at the state level, prevailing wage, things of that nature. So we're just looking way by which we can provide a more effective and efficient manner by which our cities and municipalities provide services to their residents by way of potentially looking at programs developed at the state level that can potentially be cut back or redirected.
And at the state legislature, we see the proposed impact that the governor has submitted to us. And I can assure you, there isn't one legislator that is not hearing from their local or urban hospital saying that it is an extreme proposal. Our job in the Finance Committee, as well as the Appropriations Committee, is to try and analyze the data that's in front of us and see if there's any way we can alleviate that mitigation. Obviously, the governor has a very tough task trying to balance the budget. His is a proposal. It doesn't mean that everything that he proposes goes through the legislature. Our job in the legislature is to listen to our constituents and move accordingly and try and take the issues that are being raised that we may not have been aware of. And I want to thank the hospital folks to provide that information, and they have done so.
With respect to tort reform, and I assume in relation to hospitals, you're discussing in terms of medical malpractice, it is my understanding, and it's actually been said by all sides, that the insurance rates have gone down and the number of claims have gone down over the last perhaps decade or 5 to 10 years. And part of this is there was legislation done in 2005 which did make some changes to how we approach those types of cases, and it appears that a lot of it is working. There are some requests to tweak it in some ways which have been considered, but for the most part it is getting better, and I don't see any real major tort reform bills coming through, and I don't think there really were any that were proposed in terms of, if you're talking about things such as caps on damages and stuff like that, it's that's not something we're going to be doing this session.
Commissioner of Education, in part of the Education Reform Act of last year, established the school districts that are having difficulty, and Stamford as being what is known as the Lions District, therefore was favorable a bit more because of that as well. So therefore, for this year, we are going to be getting close to $1 million more in NSCS grants than we had before. So I'm happy about that, and going forward, the formula is more of an equitable formula than it was before, and hopefully it will remain that way.
So I would suggest that this organization, which played a pivotal role in trying to keep Right Tech open as it closed the first time, and then was pivotal in helping us with community support to make sure that it got that $90 million investment through bonding, and that it got the support that we needed across the state and locally for the reopening of the school, that the chamber re-engaged now and frankly demand a seat at the table and an opportunity to weigh in on the shape and structure of Right Tech as it reopens. It's critical that we do this right.
The state may not be as excited for us as we are to have a funnel of funding into UConn Stanford, particularly if we can get some dormitory type housing, because they may not see the potential that Stanford has that we do. So it is something that we really need support from the business community, because we want people to know that if we can get UConn Stanford really make a strong push for it, that will actually generate jobs throughout the state and help everybody. And that's something that we are pushing, and I know the administration is pushing, and we could certainly use your help on that.
Basically, what we're trying to do is we want to leverage the Yukon facility here in Stamford in its proximity to not only Lower Fairfield, but also New York City and the whole northeastern corridor. We are at the hub of so many important industries. And what we don't want to have happen is what has happened in the past, where Yukon had to turn away students because they couldn't get them all to always go to the Storrs campus for their full 4-year degree. And here in Stamford, they're already at capacity for the students wanting to get a quality education in a local market. And so it only makes sense that we want to try and expand that so they can get their 4-year degree and even go towards their master's in key industries such as finance, because we have such a financial infrastructure here.
This is an opportunity for us, and there's a reason why we're talking finally about expanding Yukon Stanford. So we have a true flagship state research university here on the ground in Stanford. Has a huge driver of economic growth here in this part of the state and in our community. That's why we're talking about doing the Stamford parking garage now. That's why the Atlantic Street underpass is in our focus. That's why the reopening of Right Tech is happening. So when we exhort you to get involved and to participate, we're not just saying that as something you would say at a lunch like this. We're saying that because the moment is now, and we won't always have this window. We won't always have the stars align in the way they are right now for us in Hartford, particularly when it's so hard, as Jerry commented earlier. You know, before the governor became governor, we're still fighting these fights, but it was much harder to get that level of attention.
The governor presents his budget. He did that in February. It always generates a lot of discussion, and it's never what actually ends up being the final product. So I mean, people see what's in the governor's budget, they look at it, and they certainly, you know, get revved up if it affects their specific group. And then next week, I believe it's next week, and maybe early the following week, the Appropriations Committee will come up with their budget. That would be the legislative version of a budget. And then at that point, the two branches of government, the legislative and executive, get together, and they come up with what's our final product. The question is, are we going to be done by the end of session, June 5th? We're not always in agreement by then. I think everyone's optimistic, and we're still hoping that we can meet that goal.
The key thing to keep in mind as we do these forums and talk to our constituents is there is no budget yet for 13 to 15. These are proposals, and so the so-called hospital tax, the elimination of the car tax, the increase in education cost-sharing dollars is all a proposal, and that's what it is right now. It's got the full force and weight of the governor behind it, but that's political pressure, and that's his bargaining position.
But the whole first 2 months with the gun legislation that we just passed really did take away a lot of time. So now we're in a very concentrated time frame to try and do the work that we have to do, but much faster. So the goal, quite frankly, is to finish on time. None of us would like to be there any longer than we need to. We want to be able to pass a budget that we can be proud of and hopefully get support from the community. But at the same time, if we are unable to meet that deadline, we do go into special session and we work until we get it done.
The governor has 3 major priorities. There are others, but 3 that I can glean from his proposal. One is he wants to focus our priorities as a state on education and funding education. And that's why in his budget he's proposed to move a lot more funding into the education cost-sharing grant. Now, he gives in one and takes away payments in lieu of taxes and other forms of funding, but what he's saying is he wants to send a message to all 169 towns that this should be a principal priority of each municipality to fund its obligation to educate its children. The other 2 things are transparency on municipal taxation. As a former mayor, I think that's part of the conversation. He wants to talk about what's really behind the car tax. It is a form of property tax, and How is it levied? And then finally, economic development, long-term economic development. Investing in Yukon is an attempt to answer the decades-long generational slide in economic growth in this state. So as you think about the governor's budget and what you hear, keep in mind that that's what he's trying to do, and that's what the proposal represents.